Princess Zara Veltar stood before the massive crystal windows of the royal palace, watching the twin suns of Valathos Prime cast their golden light across the city below. The sight that once filled her with pride now brought only pain. Today would be the last day she would see this view as a member of the royal family. The medical results lay on the ornate table behind her, written in the flowing script of the Valethian language. The words burned in her mind even though she had memorized every cruel detail: genetic anomaly, reproductive failure, no possibility of offspring. In a society where fertility determined worth and power, these words were a death sentence to everything she had ever been. Her father, Emperor Thane Veltar, entered the chamber with heavy steps. His tall frame seemed bent under an invisible weight, and his usually proud silver hair hung loose around his shoulders. He had ruled the Valethian Empire for 3 centuries, but today he looked older than his 800 years. "The High Council has made their decision," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "They cannot allow a sterile princess to remain in the line of succession. It would damage the genetic purity of our bloodline." Zara turned from the window, her violet eyes dry despite the pain in her chest. She had cried all her tears in the privacy of her chambers over the past week since the diagnosis. Now only numbness remained. "What is to become of me, father?" Emperor Thane finally looked at her, and she saw her own anguish reflected in his face. "The council wants you exiled to the outer colonies, but I convinced them to accept a compromise. You will serve as a cultural liaison aboard the research vessel Meridian. It is a joint mission with the humans to study artifacts on Nexus 7. The words hit her like physical blows. A cultural liaison was barely above a servant in status. To be assigned to work with humans, whom most Valethians considered inferior, was the deepest insult possible. Yet she could see the love in her father's eyes, the desperate attempt to save her from complete disgrace. "The humans," she repeated slowly. "Those short-lived creatures who breed like insects and have no telepathic abilities at all." "They are our allies now," her father said carefully. "The treaty requires cooperation in scientific endeavors. Your education in xenoarchaeology makes you suitable for the position." Zara understood the unspoken truth. This assignment was exile disguised as duty. She would be removed from court, forgotten by noble society, and left to waste away among aliens and artifacts on a distant world. Yet it was better than the alternative of complete banishment to a prison colony. "How long will this assignment last?" she asked. "Indefinitely," her father replied, the word hanging between them like a blade. The door chimed softly, and Keth entered the chamber. Her personal servant had been with her since childhood, a rare friend in a world where relationships were built on political advantage. His blue-tinted skin showed the stress patterns that revealed his emotional state, something only those close to him could read. "Your Highness," he said formally, though his voice carried warmth. "The transport is ready for departure." Zara nodded and gathered the few personal items she was allowed to take. Her ceremonial robes, symbols of her rank, would remain in the palace. Instead, she wore the plain gray uniform of a diplomatic aide. The simple clothing felt foreign against her skin. "Keth," she said suddenly, "you do not have to come with me. Find service with another noble family. Your talents are wasted in exile." The servant straightened his shoulders. "Where you go, I go, princess. That has not changed, regardless of what the council says about your status." His loyalty brought the first genuine emotion she had felt in days. In a world where her closest friends had abandoned her the moment they learned of her condition, Keth's faithfulness was a precious gift. Emperor Thane approached slowly and placed his hands on her shoulders. "My daughter, you are more than your ability to bear children. You have intelligence, compassion, and strength. Perhaps among the humans, you will find a different way to measure worth." "The humans measure worth differently?" she asked. "So their ambassador claims. They speak of something called merit, of judging individuals by their actions rather than their birth or biology. I never understood it before, but perhaps there is wisdom in their strange ways." The transport's departure signal echoed through the palace communications system. Time had run out for goodbyes and regrets. Zara embraced her father one final time, memorizing the scent of his robes and the feel of his strong arms around her. "Be careful, little star," he whispered, using the pet name from her childhood. "The galaxy is vast and full of dangers, but it may also hold opportunities we cannot imagine." Zara walked through the palace corridors one last time, past the portraits of her ancestors and the golden statues of past emperors. Courtiers who once competed for her attention now avoided her gaze, whispering behind their hands about the fallen princess. Lady Vera, who had been her closest friend since academy days, actually stepped into an alcove to avoid acknowledging her presence. The pain of rejection cut deeper than the original diagnosis. She had learned that her medical condition was not the only thing that defined her worth in others' eyes. Fear of association with failure made former friends into strangers. At the transport bay, a small crowd had gathered, but not to bid her farewell. They came to witness the departure of someone who had fallen from grace, to remind themselves how quickly fortune could change. Zara held her head high and walked past them without acknowledging their stares. The transport ship was smaller than the grand vessel she was accustomed to, built for function rather than elegance. As it lifted off from the palace landing pad, Zara pressed her face to the small porthole and watched her home world shrink below her. The crystal spires of the capital city became tiny points of light, then disappeared entirely as they entered hyperspace. Keth sat across from her in the cramped passenger compartment. "What are your orders, Princess?" he asked quietly. Zara considered the question carefully. She was no longer a princess in anything but name. Her titles were gone, her inheritance forfeit, her future uncertain. Yet something stirred within her as she contemplated the unknown path ahead. "We will learn about these humans," she said finally. "If they truly measure worth differently than we do, perhaps I can find value in myself that our people cannot see. And we will study these ancient artifacts with the dedication they deserve. Knowledge, at least, cannot be taken from me." The transport continued its journey toward the research vessel Meridian, carrying the former princess toward an uncertain destiny among the stars. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood in the docking bay of the research vessel Meridian, watching the Valethian transport approach through the transparent aluminum viewport. His dark hair was regulation short, and his earth-brown eyes carried the steady gaze of someone who had seen combat and survived. At 32, he was young for his rank, but the scars on his hands told the story of hard-won experience in the Centauri conflicts. "Sir, the Valethian delegation is requesting permission to board," reported Sergeant Lisa Parker, his second-in-command. Her voice carried the crisp professionalism Jake expected from his team. "Grant permission," Jake replied. "And remind the Crew about the cultural briefings. These people take protocol seriously. The Meridian was humanity's most advanced research vessel, a joint project designed to accommodate both human and alien crew members. Jake commanded the military escort detail, responsible for protecting the scientists and maintaining security during the dangerous expedition to Nexus 7. The planet was known for its hostile wildlife and unstable weather patterns, but the ancient artifacts discovered there promised to reveal secrets about a long-dead civilization. As the airlock cycled open, Jake got his first look at their new Valethian colleagues. The delegation was led by Dr. Vex Mordan, a tall figure whose silver skin had an almost metallic sheen. His telepathic abilities made him valuable for the mission, but his arrogant bearing suggested he considered humans beneath his notice. Behind Dr. Mordan walked two other figures. The first was clearly a servant, his blue-tinted skin marked with the subtle patterns that indicated his lower caste status. The second figure made Jake pause. She was tall like all Valethians, but something about her posture spoke of hidden strength beneath apparent fragility. Her violet eyes swept the docking bay with keen intelligence, taking in every detail of human technology and personnel. "Welcome aboard the Meridian," Jake said, stepping forward with a formal salute. "I am Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, military escort commander for this mission." Dr. Morden barely acknowledged the greeting. "I am Dr. Vex Morden, Chief, xenoarchaeologist for the Valethian Empire. This is my assistant, cultural liaison Zara, and her servant Keth." Jake noticed how the doctor introduced the woman without using any titles. Unusual for Valethians, who typically announced their full names and ranks. The woman herself said nothing, but her eyes met his briefly, and he sensed sadness behind her, composed expression. "Dr. Patricia Wells will show you to your quarters," Jake said. "We begin surface operations on Nexus 7 tomorrow morning." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and initial surveys. Jake found himself observing the Valethian team with growing interest. Dr. Morden treated the human scientists with barely concealed contempt, often ignoring their suggestions and making decisions without consultation. The servant, Keth, remained, quietly efficient, anticipating needs before they were spoken. But it was Zara who captured Jake's attention. Despite her apparently low status, she demonstrated extensive knowledge of xenoarchaeology and ancient civilizations. When she thought no one was watching, she would study the human crew with the same careful attention she gave to alien artifacts. Her questions, when she dared to ask them, showed a curious mind eager to understand new concepts. The first joint expedition to Nexus 7's surface revealed the planet's dangers immediately. The atmosphere was breathable but thin, requiring supplemental oxygen for extended work. Strange crystalline formations dotted the landscape, and the ruins of the ancient city stretched across several kilometers of broken terrain. Jake led the security detail, while Dr. Wells and Dr. Mordan argued about excavation priorities. Zara worked quietly nearby, carefully cataloging smaller artifacts that the senior scientists overlooked. Her servant Keth assisted her with the same dedication he might show to royalty, which struck Jake as unusual for a simple cultural liaison. "Those markings are fascinating," Jake said, approaching Zara as she studied a carved stone tablet. "What do they tell you about the people who made them?" Zara looked up, surprised that he had addressed her directly. "The script is unlike anything in our databases," she replied carefully. "But the mathematical concepts they reference suggest a highly advanced understanding of physics and engineering." "You can read mathematics in a dead language?" Jake asked, genuinely impressed. "Numbers are universal," Zara explained. and for the first time since boarding the ship, her voice carried enthusiasm. Mathematical relationships remain constant regardless of the species that discovers them. These builders understood concepts that our own scientists are only now beginning to explore. Their conversation was interrupted by sudden movement in the ruins ahead. Creatures emerged from hidden caves, their crystalline shells reflecting the harsh sunlight of Nexus 7. They moved with predatory grace, clearly adapted to hunt in the broken landscape. "Defensive positions," Jake ordered, his training taking over immediately. The security team moved with practiced efficiency, creating a protective perimeter around the scientists. Dr. Mordan stepped forward confidently. "These are mere beasts," he announced. "My telepathic abilities will control them easily." Jake watched as the Valethian scientist attempted to project mental commands at the approaching creatures. For a moment, they slowed their advance, and Dr. Mordan smiled triumphantly. Then something went wrong. The creatures shrugged off his mental influence and charged with renewed fury. "Telepathy is not working," Dr. Mordan called out, his voice showing the first crack in his arrogant composure. Jake reacted instantly. He had studied the mission briefings extensively and remembered details about Nexus 7's wildlife that others had overlooked. "They hunt by vibration," he shouted. "Everyone freeze and stop breathing so hard." The security team obeyed immediately, trained to trust their commander's judgment. The scientists were slower to react, but Jake's calm authority convinced them to remain still. For long moments, the only sounds were the soft whisper of wind through the ruins and the subtle clicks of the creatures' crystalline shells. The predators moved through the frozen group, their sensory organs scanning for the vibrations that marked living prey. Finding nothing, they gradually lost interest and retreated to their caves. "How did you know that would work?" Dr. Wells asked once the danger had passed. "I read the preliminary surveys," Jake replied simply. "The reports mentioned that the creatures were sensitive to ground vibrations. When telepathy failed, I tried a different approach." Zara stared at him with new interest. She had watched him solve a problem that had defeated superior Valethian mental abilities through simple observation and logical thinking. The concept challenged everything she had been taught about human limitations. That evening, as the expedition made camp in the ruins, Zara found herself working near Jake's position. He was reviewing tactical maps and making notes about defensive positions for future excavations. "You saved our lives today," she said quietly. Jake looked up from his work. "Just doing my job. Your Dr. Mordan will probably find a way to control those creatures once he studies them more." "Perhaps," Zara replied. "But you solved the immediate problem while he was still trying to understand why his methods failed. There is wisdom in your approach." "Different tools for different problems," Jake said. "My grandmother used to say that if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Sometimes you need a screwdriver instead." Zara tilted her head, trying to understand the human metaphor. "Your grandmother taught you military strategy?" Jake laughed, and the sound was warm in the cold air of Nexus 7. "She taught me practical problem-solving. She raised me after my parents died, worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed. She never had much education, but she was the smartest person I ever knew." The idea fascinated Zara. In Valethian society, wisdom came from bloodline and formal training. The concept of learning from someone of low birth was almost incomprehensible. "She sounds remarkable," Zara said carefully. "She was. She taught me that worth comes from what you do, Not where you come from. Jake paused, studying Zara's face in the flickering light of their campfire. She would have liked you, I think. You notice things that others miss. Zara felt something stir in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. When was the last time someone had complimented her intelligence rather than her bloodline or appearance? She realized she could not remember. Thank you, she whispered. As the expedition settled down for the night, Zara lay awake in her sleeping shelter, thinking about Jake's words and actions. He had treated her as an equal, valued her knowledge, and shared personal stories without knowing anything about her background. For the first time since her diagnosis, she began to wonder if there might be different ways to measure a person's worth. The weeks that followed brought Zara and Jake together more frequently as the excavation work expanded across the ruins of Nexus 7. Dr. Wells had requested that the military team assist with artifact analysis, and Jake's practical approach to problem-solving made him valuable for understanding ancient technology. Zara found herself assigned as his primary liaison, translating Valethian scientific concepts into terms the human team could understand. Their working relationship began formally, but gradually became something deeper. Jake would arrive at the artifact analysis tent each morning with 2 cups of coffee, one prepared the way Zara had mentioned she preferred it. She began staying late to help him understand the cultural context behind their discoveries, sharing knowledge that went far, beyond her official duties. This symbol keeps appearing in different locations, Jake said one evening, pointing to a recurring glyph in their database. It shows up on religious artifacts, technical manuals, and even children's toys. What could it mean? Zara studied the symbol carefully, cross-referencing it with linguistic patterns from other dead civilizations. It appears to represent unity or joining, she said, but not in the way our cultures typically understand it. Look at the mathematical relationships surrounding it. She pulled up holographic displays showing the symbol's context in various artifacts. Every time it appears, it is associated with concepts of strength through diversity. These people seem to believe that different types of beings working together created something greater than the sum of their parts. Jake leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. That is completely opposite to what both our species teach. Humans stick with humans. Valethians maintain genetic purity. But these people actively sought out differences. The evidence suggests they were incredibly successful, Zara added. Their technology surpassed anything we have achieved, and their civilization lasted for millennia. Perhaps their approach to diversity gave them advantages we do not understand. As they worked together, Jake began to notice things about Zara that did not match her supposed background. Her knowledge of royal protocols was too detailed for a simple cultural liaison. Her speech patterns sometimes slipped into the formal cadences used by nobility. Most telling of all, Keth treated her with a devotion that went far beyond normal servant loyalty. "Zara," Jake said during one of their late-night analysis sessions, "can I ask you a personal question?" She looked up from the artifact she was examining, tension immediately visible in her posture. "What do you wish to know?" "You are not really just a cultural liaison, are you?" Jake asked gently. "Your knowledge is too extensive, your bearing too regal, and Keth acts like he is serving royalty, not a diplomatic aid." For a long moment, Zara said nothing. The silence stretched between them, filled with the soft hum of the research equipment and the distant sounds of Nexus 7's night creatures. Finally, she set down her tools and looked directly at him. "What would you say if I told you I was once important in Valethian society, But lost everything because of a medical condition that made me worthless to my people? She asked quietly. Jake considered her words carefully. I would say that any society that judges people by their medical conditions instead of their character is making a serious mistake. Even if that condition meant I could never have children. The words came out barely above a whisper, especially then. Jake replied without hesitation. Some of the best people I have known were unable to have biological children. My commanding officer in the Centauri conflicts, Colonel Martinez, and her wife adopted 6 orphans from war zones. They gave those kids lives they never would have had otherwise. Biology does not define family or worth. Zara stared at him in amazement. In Valethian society, her infertility made her a genetic dead end, a failure of evolution. But Jake spoke of it as simply another aspect of who she was, no more defining than the color of her eyes. Your people truly think this way? She asked. Not all of them, Jake admitted. But enough of us do. We judge people by their actions, their character, their contributions to society. Having children is wonderful for those who can and want to, but it is not the only way to make a life meaningful. That night, Zara told him the truth about her identity. She explained about her royal birth, her exile, and the shame that surrounded her condition in Valethian culture. Jake listened without judgment, asking questions only to understand her experiences better. So you gave up a throne because you cannot bear children, he said when she finished. I did not give it up, Zara corrected. It was taken from me. In our society, the royal bloodline must continue. A sterile princess is worse than useless. She is dangerous to the genetic integrity of the empire. Jake shook his head in disbelief. What a waste. Your mind is brilliant, your knowledge vast, your instincts sharp. Any society that would discard someone like you over biology is too stupid to deserve good leadership. His words hit her like a physical force. No one in her entire life had ever suggested that her exile represented a loss to Valethian society rather than a necessary removal of damaged goods. You really believe that? She whispered. I know it, Jake replied firmly. I have worked with you for weeks now. I have seen how you think, how you solve problems, how you treat others with respect regardless of their status. You would have been a remarkable leader. As their personal connection deepened, their professional discoveries became even more significant. They uncovered evidence that the ancient Nexus civilization had been composed of multiple species working together. The ruins contained living quarters designed for beings of different sizes and environmental needs. The technology showed clear signs of hybrid development, combining approaches that no single species could have achieved alone. This changes everything we thought we knew about galactic history, Zara said as they documented their findings. For thousands of years, both our peoples have believed that species mixing leads to weakness and genetic degradation. But this civilization proves the opposite. Maybe that is why they were so successful, Jake suggested. While other civilizations were maintaining genetic purity, these people were combining the best traits and ideas from multiple species. Their discovery did not go unnoticed. Dr. Mordan had been watching their work with growing suspicion and anger. He resented the success of the human-Valethian partnership and was particularly disturbed by what he saw as inappropriate closeness between Jake and Zara. This research is becoming contaminated by human thinking, he complained to Dr. Wells during a senior staff meeting. The cultural liaison is spending too much time with the military personnel and drawing conclusions that lack scientific rigor. Dr. Wells frowned. Jake's insights have been valuable to our work. His practical approach complements our theoretical knowledge. It is improper for a Valethian to form such close working relationships with humans, Dr. Morden insisted, especially one of her background. What do you mean by her background? Jake asked sharply. Dr. Morden smiled coldly. Has she not told you? She is not merely a cultural liaison. She is the disgraced daughter of Emperor Thane Veltar, exiled for her genetic failures and sent here to keep her away from decent society. The revelation hit the human team like a shockwave. They had been working alongside exiled royalty without knowing it, but Jake felt only anger at the casual cruelty in Dr. Mordan's voice. Her background does not change the quality of her work, or the value of her contributions, he said firmly. Her very presence here contaminated this mission from the beginning, Dr. Morden continued, and now she has formed an inappropriate attachment to a human soldier. Such behavior dishonors both our species. That night, Jake found Zara in the artifact storage area, carefully packing away their most significant discoveries. Her movements were precise but mechanical, as if she was trying to stay busy to avoid thinking. So now you know the complete truth, she said without looking at him. I am not just infertile. I am exiled royalty whose very existence is considered a shame to my people. None of that changes who you are, Jake replied. It just means your people are even more foolish than I thought. Zara finally looked at him, tears glittering in her violet eyes. You still say that even knowing what I am? Jake stepped closer, reaching out to gently touch her hand. What you are is brilliant, kind, courageous, and beautiful. The rest is just politics and prejudice. Dr. Morden is right about one thing, she whispered. My attachment to you is inappropriate by the standards of both our peoples. Then maybe it is time to question those standards, Jake said softly. Everything we have discovered here suggests that our peoples are wrong about the value of diversity and cooperation. Maybe they are wrong about other things, too. As Nexus 7's twin moons rose over the ancient ruins, Jake and Zara stood together in the storage tent, surrounded by artifacts from a civilization that had embraced the very things their own cultures rejected. For the first time since her exile began, Zara allowed herself to hope that there might be a different way to live and love in the galaxy. The morning that changed everything began like any other on Nexus 7. Jake was reviewing security reports when his communication device crackled with an urgent message from the Meridian's bridge. Commander Morrison, we have multiple Valethian Imperial vessels dropping out of hyperspace, reported Captain Stevens. They are requesting immediate communication with the Valethian delegation and demanding that all research activities cease. Jake felt his blood run cold. Imperial intervention meant serious trouble, likely connected to Dr. Mordan's complaints about the mission's direction. He found Zara in the artifact analysis tent, her face pale as she read a message on her personal communicator. My brother is coming, she said quietly. Prince Davin commands the lead vessel. He has been sent to retrieve me and evaluate the mission's findings. What does that mean for us? Jake asked. Nothing good, Zara replied. Davin is completely loyal to Imperial doctrine. If he believes I have been corrupted by human influence or that our research contradicts Valethian beliefs, he will shut down everything and arrest anyone he considers responsible. Within hours, the Imperial delegation had landed on Nexus 7. Prince Davin Veltar was an imposing figure, taller even than most Valethians, with the silver skin and violet eyes that marked pure royal bloodline. His ceremonial armor gleamed with symbols of imperial authority, and his retinue of guards carried weapons that could kill with a single shot. Dr. Morden greeted the prince with obvious relief. Your Highness, I am grateful for your swift response to my reports. The situation here has become quite concerning. Explain, Prince Davin commanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone born to rule. The research has been contaminated by human methodology and inappropriate relationships between species, Dr. Morden said. Your sister has formed an attachment to the human military commander that violates all proper protocols. Prince Davin's eyes found Zara across the camp. She stood straight despite her fear, meeting his gaze with the dignity she had learned in the royal court. Sister, he said formally, you will accompany me immediately for private consultation. Jake stepped forward. With respect, Your Highness, Zara is a valued member of our research team. Any discussion of her status should include the human leadership. The prince turned his attention to Jake, studying him with the careful assessment of a predator evaluating prey. You are the human soldier who has corrupted my sister's thinking. I am Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, Jake replied firmly, and I have not corrupted anyone. Zara's intelligence and insights have been invaluable to our mission. You speak of her with improper familiarity, Prince Davin observed, and you fail to acknowledge her true status as exiled royalty whose very presence dishonors our bloodline. Jake felt anger building in his chest. The only thing that dishonors your bloodline is your willingness to throw away someone as remarkable as Zara because of something she cannot control. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of human reinforcements. Admiral Kate Sullivan materialized via transport beam, her presence immediately shifting the balance of power in the camp. Behind her came a full diplomatic team and additional security personnel, Your Highness, Admiral Sullivan said with careful politeness. I trust there is no problem with our joint research mission? Prince Davin straightened to his full height. The problem is that your personnel have overstepped the boundaries of appropriate interspecies cooperation. My sister has been allowed to form inappropriate attachments that compromise her judgment and dishonor both our peoples. From what I understand, Admiral Sullivan replied coolly, your sister has made significant contributions to this mission. Her partnership with Commander Morrison has produced discoveries that advance our understanding of ancient galactic civilizations. Discoveries that contradict fundamental principles of Valethian society, Dr. Morden interjected. They promote dangerous ideas about species mixing and genetic diversity that threaten the purity of our bloodlines. Admiral Sullivan raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting that scientific truth should be suppressed because it contradicts your political beliefs? The tension in the camp was approaching the breaking point when Zara herself stepped forward. Enough, she said, her voice carrying an authority that reminded everyone present of her royal heritage. I will not stand here while others debate my fate as if I have no voice in the matter. She turned to face her brother directly. Davin, I know why you have come. The High Council has decided that my exile is insufficient punishment for the crime of existing with a genetic flaw. They want me removed entirely from any position where I might influence imperial policy or contaminate pure bloodlines. Prince Davin's expression remained stern, but Jake caught a flicker of something that might have been pain in his eyes. The Council offers you a chance at redemption, he said formally. Lord Kex Thrand has agreed to marry you despite your condition. You would have a position as his third wife, honored but unable to produce heirs. It is more than most in your situation could expect. A political marriage to a minor noble who needs imperial favor more than he fears my genetic flaws, Zara replied bitterly. and all I have to do is renounce my friendship with these humans and suppress research that threatens imperial doctrine. Yes, Prince Davin said simply. Zara looked around the camp, her gaze touching on Dr. Wells and the human research team, on Keth, who had served her faithfully through exile, and finally on Jake. She saw acceptance, respect, and something deeper in his eyes that she had never expected to find anywhere in the galaxy. "I refuse," she said clearly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Prince Davin stared at his sister in shock. "You refuse?" "I refuse to apologize for existing," Zara continued, her voice growing stronger. "I refuse to hide research that could benefit all sentient species because it threatens imperial prejudices. And I refuse to abandon people who have shown me more respect and kindness than I ever received in the palace." Dr. Morden sputtered in outrage. "You cannot refuse an imperial decree." "Watch me," Zara replied, turning to face Admiral Sullivan. "I formally request asylum with the human government." The request sent shockwaves through both delegations. Prince Davin's hand moved toward his weapon, while the human security team tensed for possible conflict. Admiral Sullivan raised her hand for calm. "That is a serious request with significant diplomatic implications," she said carefully. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Jake stepped closer to Zara, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Whatever she decides, she has my complete support." "And mine," added Dr. Wells. "Zara's contributions to xenoarchaeology have been extraordinary. Any institution would be honored to have her." Keth moved to stand behind Zara, his loyalty unchanged despite the political earthquake unfolding around them. "Where you go, I go, Princess," he said quietly. Prince Davin looked around the camp, seeing his sister surrounded by humans who valued her intelligence and character over her bloodline and fertility. For the first time since his arrival, his composed expression cracked slightly. "Sister, think carefully about what you are doing," he said, and his voice carried genuine concern rather than imperial authority. "If you do this, there will be no path back to Valethos Prime. You will be truly exiled, cut off from everything you have ever known." Zara met her brother's eyes with steady resolve. "Everything I knew rejected me when I needed it most. These people accepted me when I had nothing to offer but my knowledge and dedication. The choice is not difficult." Admiral Sullivan stepped forward. "Prince Davin, I believe we need to contact our respective governments before this situation escalates further. Perhaps we should all return to our ships and allow diplomacy to address these issues. There will be consequences for this," Prince Davin warned, but his tone suggested he was following protocol rather than making personal threats. He looked at Jake with something approaching respect. "You realize what you are asking her to give up?" "I realize what she would be giving up if she returned with you," Jake replied. "The chance to be valued for who she really is, rather than punished for what she cannot control." As the delegations prepared to return to their respective vessels, Zara found herself caught between two worlds. Behind her lay the familiar confines of Valethian society, where bloodline and fertility determined worth. Ahead lay an uncertain future among humans who seemed to judge her by different standards entirely. She had made her choice, but the galaxy would now have to deal with the consequences of a princess who chose love and respect over duty and tradition. The standoff between the human and Valethian fleets lasted 3 tense days. Ships hung motionless in space above Nexus 7, their weapons powered but not yet aimed, while diplomats from both governments engaged in urgent negotiations. Jake found himself confined to quarters aboard the Meridian, officially for his own protection but really to prevent him from complicating an already delicate situation. Zara paced her temporary quarters like a caged animal, knowing that her single decision had potentially triggered an interstellar crisis. Through her small porthole, she could see the massive hull of her brother's flagship, the Sovereign's Will, bristling with weapons that could reduce the human research vessel to atoms within seconds. The breakthrough came when Emperor Thane Veltar himself arrived in the system. His flagship, the Crown of Valathos, dwarfed all other vessels present, its crystalline hull reflecting the light of Nexus 7's star like a jewel among shadows. Jake watched from the observation deck as the Emperor's personal shuttle approached the Meridian, escorted by fighters from both fleets. "He is coming to speak with you," Admiral Sullivan informed Zara. "Both governments have agreed that this situation requires the highest level of diplomatic intervention." When Emperor Thane entered the conference room, Jake was struck by how much the Valethian ruler resembled his daughter. The same violet eyes, the same careful intelligence in his expression, but weighted down by centuries of responsibility and difficult choices. He wore simple robes rather than ceremonial armor, a gesture that suggested he came as a father rather than an emperor. "My daughter," he said quietly, and Jake heard genuine pain in his voice. "Do you understand what you have done? I have chosen to value myself as these humans value me," Zara replied, standing straight despite her obvious emotional turmoil. "Rather than accepting a life of shame for crimes I did not commit." Emperor Thane looked around the conference room, taking in the human faces watching the exchange. "And what do these humans offer you that your own people could not?" Jake found himself speaking before he fully realized it. "Respect, Your Majesty. The chance to be judged by her actions and character rather than her biology." The Emperor's attention focused on Jake with laser intensity. "You are the human soldier who has captured my daughter's affections? I am the human who learned to value her intelligence, courage, and kindness," Jake replied carefully. "Her affections are her own to give." "And what are your intentions toward her?" Jake felt the weight of history pressing down on the moment. His answer could determine whether the standoff ended in diplomacy or warfare. "I intend to love and protect her for as long as she will allow me to do so, regardless of what sacrifices that requires." Emperor Thane studied Jake for a long moment, then turned back to his daughter. "Show me this research that has caused such controversy." For the next several hours, Zara and Jake presented their findings about the ancient Nexus civilization. They demonstrated how multiple species had worked together to create technologies and social structures that surpassed anything achieved by species working in isolation. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "This challenges everything our society has believed for millennia," Emperor Thane said finally. "Yes," Zara agreed, "but truth does not become false simply because it contradicts our beliefs." Dr. Morden, who had been silent during the presentation, finally spoke up. "Your Majesty, this research promotes dangerous ideas that could destabilize our entire social order. If people believe that genetic purity is unnecessary, what happens to our caste system, our breeding programs, our fundamental understanding of Valethian superiority?" "Perhaps," Emperor Thane said slowly, "our fundamental understanding needs to be questioned." The words sent shockwaves through the Valethian delegation. Dr. Morden stared at his emperor in horror, while Prince Davin looked as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "Father," Prince Davin said carefully, Surely you cannot be considering abandoning principles that have guided our empire for thousands of years. Emperor Thane walked to the conference room's viewport, staring out at the research stations scattered across Nexus 7's surface. I have ruled for 3 centuries, he said quietly. In that time, I have made countless decisions based on the belief that genetic purity and bloodline superiority were the foundations of our strength. But looking at my daughter now, seeing what she has accomplished in exile, I begin to wonder if we have been measuring strength incorrectly. He turned, back to face the room. Zara was raised to be the perfect Valethian princess. Educated, intelligent, trained in diplomacy and leadership. When we discovered her infertility, we decided that all of those qualities were meaningless because she could not produce heirs. We threw away a mind that could have served our empire for centuries because of a single biological limitation. The bloodline must be preserved, Dr. Morden insisted. Must it? Emperor Thane asked. This research suggests that civilizations grow stronger through diversity, not weaker. What if our obsession with genetic purity has been holding us back rather than advancing us? Jake watched the debate with fascination and growing hope. The Emperor was clearly wrestling with concepts that challenged everything he had been taught, but his love for his daughter was creating cracks in his ideological certainty. What would you propose, Your Majesty? Admiral Sullivan asked. Emperor Thane was quiet for a long moment, the weight of galactic history resting on his next words. I propose that we conduct an experiment. Let my daughter remain with the humans, if that is her choice. Let her partnership with Commander Morrison continue and flourish. Let us see what they can accomplish together that neither could achieve alone. And if the High Council objects, Prince Davin asked, then perhaps it is time for the High Council to learn some new ideas, Emperor Thane replied firmly. I am still Emperor of the Valethian Empire, and I declare that my daughter's exile is ended. She may choose her own path, whether that leads back to Valathos Prime, or toward a future among the stars with these humans. Dr. Mordan made one last desperate attempt to maintain the old order. Your Majesty, this sets a dangerous precedent. If members of the royal family can choose their own paths regardless of genetic fitness, what prevents others from making similar choices? Nothing, Emperor Thane said simply. And perhaps that is exactly what our empire needs. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed research station orbiting Nexus 7, watching supply ships from both human and Valethian territories dock with the growing facility. The joint research project had expanded into something unprecedented in galactic history, a true collaboration between species that had once viewed each other with suspicion. Zara approached from behind, her steps silent on the deck plating. She wore neither human nor Valethian clothing, but a practical jumpsuit designed for the mixed environment of the research station. Her hair was shorter now, cut in a style that reflected her new life rather than her royal past. The morning briefing is ready, she said, sliding her hand into his. Dr. Wells has identified 3 new sites for excavation, and your security team has finished installing the perimeter defenses. Jake squeezed her hand gently. Any word from Earth about the wedding preparations? Zara smiled, and the expression was free of the sadness that had haunted her during their first meeting. Admiral Sullivan confirmed that the ceremony can be held aboard the station. Both human and Valethian customs will be honored, though I suspect neither of our peoples has ever seen anything quite like what we are planning. Good, Jake replied. Let them see something new. Through the viewport, They could see teams of humans and Valethians working together on the planet's surface, uncovering more evidence of the ancient civilization that had embraced the very diversity their own cultures had rejected. The discoveries continued to challenge old assumptions and create new possibilities for cooperation. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked quietly. "Giving up your throne, your birthright, everything you were born to inherit?" Zara considered the question seriously, as she always did when Jake asked something important. "I gave up a life where my worth was determined by my ability to produce heirs for an empire that valued genetic purity above all else," she said finally. "In exchange, I found a life where my worth is determined by my contributions, my choices, and my capacity to love and be loved. That seems like an excellent trade to me." Below them, Nexus 7 continued to yield its secrets, each discovery reinforcing the lesson that strength came from unity rather than isolation. The ancient civilization had fallen eventually, as all civilizations did, but their example lived on in the artifacts they left behind and the new alliance their memory had inspired. Jake wrapped his arms around Zara, holding her close as they watched the sunrise paint the alien landscape in shades of gold and crimson. They had both given up the certainties of their birth cultures to find something neither had known they were searching for: a love that transcended species and a partnership that created possibilities neither could have imagined alone. "I love you," he whispered against her ear. "And I love you," she replied, leaning back against his chest, "more than I ever loved any throne or title or genetic legacy." As Nexus 7's twin suns climbed higher in the alien sky, the research